The Gilded Cage of Madyan. Thoughtful. What is the most dangerous poison? Perhaps it is not the one that kills instantly, but the one that tastes like profit. It is the sin that glitters in the palm of your hand, so common and so celebrated that to call it wrong is to be branded a fool. In the ancient city of Madyan, this poison was theft, and the people have been drinking it for generations. Nestled on the bustling caravan routes, Madyan was a jewel of commerce. Its people were masters of the deal, their minds as sharp as the desert sun. But their prosperity was a shimmering mirage. Disappointed. To an outsider, it was a thriving metropolis. To those who knew its secrets, it was a masterpiece of deception. Appalled. The very air, thick with the scent of distant spices and fine leather, carried the foul stench of systemic, celebrated fraud. Disgusted. The cheating was an art form. Sarcastic. It was in the weights of the merchants, deceptively heavy when they bought grain from a weary farmer, and suspiciously light when they sold it back to him. Exasperated. It was in the false bottoms of their baskets and the stretched measurements of their cloth. This was not the random greed of a few. It was the city's economic policy, an open secret that they called shrewdness. Their towering prosperity was built upon a foundation of 1,000,000 tiny thefts. Somber. Living amongst them was a man named Shuʿayb. He was from their blood, but not their character. Long before the weight of prophecy settled on his shoulders, he walked through the markets of Madyan with a heavy heart. Sadly, where his kinsmen saw a thriving economy, he saw a landscape of traps and snares. Warningly, he felt the silent sting of the cheated nomad, the quiet desperation of the family whose livelihood was stolen by a clever trick of the scales. Empathetic, he was known for his eloquence and wisdom, but a deep, isolating sorrow was his constant companion. He was a man of integrity, trapped in a city that had sold its soul. Lamenting, this rot in the marketplace was merely a symptom. Disgusted, the root of the disease was spiritual. Solemnly, the people of Madyan had abandoned the worship of the unseen God who had granted them their blessings. Disappointed, instead, they prostrated before a great leafy tree they called the al-Aykah. Bemused, as God states in the Quran, they had rejected the Creator for the created. In abandoning Him, they had abandoned His principles of justice, fairness, and truth. It was far easier to worship a tree that demanded nothing than a God who demanded integrity in every transaction. Shuʿayb watched this decay, and he knew that any structure built on a rotten foundation, no matter how beautifully it glitters, is destined for ruin. For years, his honesty was a silent protest, but his quiet grief was about to be given a divine voice, his integrity a divine command. He was about to be asked to hold up a mirror to his city and force them to look at the monsters they had become. A voice against the tipping scales. How do you reason with a people whose only reason is profit? When the divine command came, Shuʿayb approached his kinsman not as a wrathful judge, but as a concerned brother. His voice, clear and respected, cut through the din of the marketplace. He began at the root of their sickness. "Oh, my people," he pleaded, as narrated in the Quran, "worship God. You have no deity other than Him." He then pointed to the fruit of their disbelief. "And do not give less in measure and weight. Indeed, I see you in prosperity, but I truly fear for you the punishment of an all-encompassing day. Quran, chapter 11, verse 84. At first, they just laughed. This was just Shuʿayb, the dreamer, the overly pious one. But his sincerity was a potent weapon. He sought no power, no wealth for himself. And as the poor and the cheated, the daily victims of the city's scams, began to listen, the elite grew nervous. The whispers of mockery soon turned into an organized campaign of resistance. The architects of the crooked system confronted him, their arguments dripping with condescending sarcasm. "O Shuʿayb," they sneered, their words recorded for eternity, "does your prayer command you that we should leave what our fathers worshipped, or that we should stop doing with our wealth what we want? You are indeed the forbearing, the right-minded one." Quran, chapter 11, verse 87. It was a masterful deflection. They twisted his call for economic justice into an attack on their personal freedom and ancestral traditions. They painted him as an out-of-touch fanatic. Yet Shuʿayb's journey was now becoming more difficult, the path more perilous. His small flock of followers became targets, threatened with exile and ruin. The weight on his shoulders doubled. He felt the intense fear for their safety, the burden of being their protector. Resolute, "We will never be driven from our faith," he declared, his voice a shield for his frightened followers. When their reason, ridicule, and threats all failed, the leaders of Madyan, in a final breathtaking act of arrogance, decided to end the debate. They looked past the prophet standing before them, their eyes turning to the sky that had only ever blessed them with prosperity, and they issued a challenge directly to the God he spoke of. "So cause a fragment of the sky to fall upon us," they taunted, their voices laced with contempt, "if you should be of the truthful." Quran, chapter 26, verse 187. The challenge hung in the air, absolute and chilling. They had not just rejected a prophet, they had mocked the power of the Almighty himself. The merchants returned to their markets, laughing, confident in their impunity. In his home, Shuʿayb gathered his few, terrified followers. They prayed, and they waited. The countdown to judgment had begun. The day the sky answered. A challenge to the heavens is a debt that will always be collected. The judgment on Madyan did not arrive with the suddenness of a lightning strike. It began as a slow, creeping horror. An oppressive heat wave descended upon the city, a dry, suffocating heat that seemed to bake the very air they breathed. For days they suffered, their arrogance slowly melting into a desperate plea for relief. Then, a sign of hope appeared in the sky, a single dark cloud. Believing it to be a promise of cooling rain, the people of Madyan made their final, fatal error. They poured out of their sweltering homes, a great mass of humanity running towards the shade, seeking refuge in the very instrument of their doom. As they gathered beneath its dark canopy, laughing in relief, the cloud began to weep, not with rain, but with sparks of fire. The cool shadow they craved had become a furnace. As fire rained from above, the ground beneath their feet, the very earth that had sustained their corrupt civilization, began to heave. A violent tremor grew into a terrifying earthquake, and the proud city of Madyan began to crumble. The marketplaces collapsed, the crooked scales and false weights clattering into the abyss, buried alongside their owners. Yet the climax of their destruction was not the fire nor the quake. As chaos reigned, a soundless sound ripped through the city. It was the mighty blast, a celestial scream so terrible it did not need to be heard by the ears, to be felt by the soul. It was a vibration that targeted life itself. It passed through the city in an instant, and in that instant, every heart that had been filled with arrogance and deceit was extinguished. When the dawn broke, the city of Madyan was gone, its people fallen prone within their homes, as if they had never existed at all. Shuʿayb and his small band of believers, saved by God's mercy, emerged into the silence. He looked upon the utter annihilation of his homeland, his heart filled not with triumph, but with the profound, aching sorrow of a prophet who had desperately wished for his people's guidance, not their destruction. Turning away from the ruins, he uttered his final, mournful words to the silent dead. "O my people, I did certainly convey to you the messages of my Lord and gave you good advice. So how could I grieve for a people who refuse to believe?" Quran, chapter 7, verse 93. An everlasting weight on the scales of history. Some cities die, but their stories become immortal warnings. The destruction of Madyan was not an end, but the beginning of an eternal lesson. Centuries later, in Mecca, the final prophet, Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, faced his own tribe of powerful merchants, the Quraysh, who were also steeped in pride and unjust dealing. Solemn. When they mocked his call, God revealed the story of Shuʿayb as both a mirror and a divine comfort, a message that justice, no matter how long it takes, always arrives. Assertive. The legacy of Madyan is a permanent fixture in Islamic ethics. Serious. Its core sin is considered so grave that an entire chapter of the Quran is named for it. Al-Mutaffifin, the cheaters, which opens with the booming, thunderous warning, "Woe to the cheaters!" Shuʿayb's story is the ultimate case study for this warning, a timeless testament that economic justice is the bedrock of a society concerned. Today, the crooked scales of Madyan have taken on new, sophisticated forms. Disapproving, they are the hidden clauses in digital contracts, the misleading advertisements, the exploited workers, and the predatory financial products that trap the vulnerable. Firm. The sin remains the same, taking what is not rightfully yours through deception. Regretful. The people of Madyan made the fatal error of believing their faith had no place in their finances. They tried to build a wall between their God and their gold, and in the end, they lost both. Profound. The ultimate lesson is woven into the fabric of the cosmos. Emphatic. The balance is not just a tool in the marketplace. It is a universal principle. Reverent. As the Quran states, God raised the heavens and established the balance so that we would not transgress it. Dramatic. The story of Shuʿayb is the unforgettable, terrifying tale of a people who tried to tip the scales of God and were wiped from the face of the earth for it. Chilling. Their silent ruins echo a single truth through the ages. The scales of justice always, eventually, find their balance.